What would you do if the person you loved reduced your worth to a single sentence, then sent it like it was a fact? I was standing in my kitchen when the text came through. No warning. No build-up. Just words on a screen that felt heavier than they should have. He said his ex thought I was too basic for the life he wanted. And then, like it was an afterthought, he added that she was probably right. I stared at it longer than I expected. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I suddenly understood everything else. The funny part? I didn't cry. I didn't type out a paragraph. I didn't call him to argue. I replied with 2 calm words and set my phone down like nothing had happened. Good to know. That silence wasn't weakness. It was space. Space to notice how often I'd been shrinking to fit someone else's idea of impressive. Space to realize how loud insecurity sounds when it borrows someone else's voice. So I stayed quiet. For days. No blocking. No confrontation. No closure talk. And then, one afternoon, I walked into a cafe, already seated, already steady, when the bell above the door rang. And he walked in. Have you ever noticed how insults land harder when they're delivered calmly? He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. Ethan sent that text like he was forwarding the weather. Casual. Detached. As if repeating his ex's opinion somehow made it neutral. As if borrowing her words made them safer. But I knew Lena. I'd heard her name enough times to understand her role. She was the life he measured everything against. The parties. The circles. The look. And somehow, I'd become the comparison he kept failing to justify. What shocked me wasn't the message itself. It was how easily he agreed with it. Too basic. Not wrong. Not incompatible. Just beneath the life he imagined. I thought about all the times I'd toned myself down. Skipped events I didn't enjoy. Smiled through conversations that bored me. Also, he could feel like the most interesting person in the room. Funny how people call you basic when you stop performing for them. I asked myself a question I should have asked earlier. Why was I trying to prove my value to someone outsourcing his opinions? That's when I decided silence would do more than defense ever could. I didn't block him because I wanted him to sit with it. To feel the absence where reassurance used to be. And he did. Because within hours, the follow-up texts started coming. Jokes. Check-ins. Subtle panic disguised as confidence. And 3 days later, he walked into that cafe thinking he still had the upper hand. He had no idea what was waiting for him at my table. Have you ever watched someone walk confidently into a room, completely unaware the ground beneath them is about to shift? That's how Ethan entered the cafe. Same jacket. Same easy smile. Same assumption that I'd still be sitting alone, waiting, ready to explain myself. He scanned the room like a man checking inventory, already rehearsing whatever version of the story made him look reasonable. But then his eyes landed on my table. And he slowed down. Because I wasn't alone. Across from me sat Marcus. Calm. Relaxed. The kind of man who didn't need to lean forward to be noticed. He didn't look around. Didn't fidget. Didn't perform. He just listened to me, smiling at the right moments, asking questions Ethan never bothered to ask. Marcus wasn't flashy. He was established. And Ethan recognized him instantly. They'd crossed paths before. Industry events. Panels. The rooms Ethan always wanted access to but never quite belonged in. Marcus was part of that world. Not visiting. Embedded. I watched the realization settle in Ethan's face. The math started happening behind his eyes. The sudden recalibration of who I was in relation to him. Too basic, for whose life now? He approached slowly, like someone walking into a conversation that was already over. Tried to laugh it off. Tried to play casual. But his voice cracked on my name. I didn't introduce them. I didn't need to. Marcus stood, shook his hand once, firm and brief, then sat back down without asking permission. Ownership without aggression. Confidence without noise. Ethan finally looked at me, searching for the version of myself he'd dismissed. And what he found instead made him swallow hard. Because that's when I told him why I'd stayed quiet. And what I knew about his ex that he definitely didn't want said out loud. Have you ever noticed how the truth doesn't need to raise its voice? It just sits there. Calm. Waiting. Ethan pulled out the chair like he still belonged at the table. Like muscle memory alone could earn him a seat. I didn't stop him. That was the first mistake he made. He thought silence meant forgiveness. It didn't. I took a sip of my coffee. Let the pause stretch. Let him feel it. You ever watch someone realize they're no longer in control of the narrative? He started talking anyway. Nervous jokes. Half smiles. Comments about timing. About coincidence. He kept glancing at Marcus, trying to place himself in the hierarchy again, searching for a rung that wasn't there. Marcus stayed quiet. That unnerved Ethan more than confrontation ever could. Then Ethan finally said it. The line he'd clearly rehearsed. That he hadn't meant the text the way it sounded. That his ex was emotional. That he'd just needed space. That I was overreacting. I tilted my head and asked one simple question. If she didn't matter, why was he still lying for her? The color drained from his face. Because I hadn't just stayed quiet. I'd listened. I'd noticed patterns. Dates that didn't add up. Stories that changed. And while he thought my silence meant weakness, I was connecting dots he didn't even know existed. I told him I knew why his ex's name still opened doors for him. Who she'd been calling. What she'd promised him if he handled me quietly. Marcus finally spoke then. Just one sentence. And the moment he did, Ethan realized this wasn't a breakup conversation anymore. It was an exposure. And he had no idea how far it was about to go. What would you do if the person who underestimated you suddenly realized you'd already won? Ethan laughed when Marcus spoke. A sharp, brittle sound. The kind people make when their brain is scrambling for an exit. He asked how Marcus even knew about his ex, tried to frame it like gossip. Like coincidence. Like nothing. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He told Ethan he'd met his ex months earlier. At a charity event. She'd talked. Too much. About plans. About upgrading her life. About how I was temporary. About how Ethan just needed a push to finally choose better. You could see it land. Ethan turned to me, searching my face for denial. For confusion. For anything he could still control. But I'd already crossed that line days ago. The moment I stopped reacting and started observing. I reminded him of the night he disappeared. The space he needed. How his story had changed 3 times. How his phone had gone silent at exactly the wrong hours. He tried to interrupt. I didn't let him. I told him I hadn't stayed quiet because I was hurt. I stayed quiet because I wanted the full picture. And once you see the full picture, you can't unsee it. People nearby were starting to notice. The tension. The stillness. Ethan finally whispered my name. Not like a lover. Like someone realizing the ground beneath them is gone. And then I told him the one thing I hadn't said yet. The part I'd been saving. The reason Marcus was really there. And that's when Ethan stood up too fast, knocking his chair back, because he finally understood what was coming next. Have you ever watched someone panic not because they're guilty, but because they've finally lost control of the story? Ethan didn't sit back down. He hovered there, half standing, eyes darting between me and Marcus like he was calculating exits. Physical ones. Emotional ones. Any door that might still be open. I told him Marcus wasn't there by accident. Marcus leaned forward then, calm as ever, and placed a slim folder on the table. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just deliberate. The kind of movement that tells you this has been rehearsed, thought through, finished. Inside were screenshots. Messages. Dates. Times. The gaps Ethan thought no one would notice. The overlap between working late and hotel reservations. Between boys' night and missed calls. Between his ex's plans and his lies. Ethan tried to laugh again. It didn't work this time. He said it was out of context. That people always misread texts. That I was letting someone else poison my view of him. He reached for my hand like muscle memory might save him. I pulled back. I asked him why his ex knew things about my schedule. Why she knew when I'd be out of town. Why she knew which cafe I liked best. Silence. The cafe noise rushed back in. Cups clinking. A blender whining. Real life continuing while his version of reality collapsed. Marcus finally spoke again. He said he wasn't here as my new partner. Not as a hero. He was here because Ethan had tried to pitch him a deal weeks earlier. One that involved money, timing, and a very clean breakup. Ethan's face drained of color. And that's when I realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was a plan. Did he really think silence meant weakness? Because that's the mistake Ethan made the moment he saw me sitting there. Calm, composed, untouched by the insult he thought would shatter me. He froze. Just for half a second. But it was enough. His eyes darted. From my face. To the man across from me. Back to me again. His mouth opened, then closed, like his brain was scrambling to rewrite the story he'd rehearsed in his head. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Days earlier, when he sent that text, he expected tears. Questions. Maybe a fight he could win by acting superior. He didn't expect quiet. He didn't expect me to disappear without drama. And he definitely didn't expect me to show up looking like I'd leveled up instead of spiraled. You ever watch someone realize they miscalculated everything? That's what was happening in real time. Ethan forced a smile and walked over, pretending nothing was wrong. He made a joke. Something weak. Something about coincidence. I let him talk. Let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then he asked the question he couldn't hold back. So, who's this? I didn't answer right away. I took a sip of my coffee. Slow. Deliberate. Felt the weight of the moment. Then I said his name. And that's when Ethan's face changed. Because he recognized it. Not from my life. But from his own. And suddenly, the insult about being too basic didn't sound so confident anymore. Ever notice how confidence collapses when recognition hits too close to home? Ethan's posture shifted the moment the name left my mouth. His shoulders stiffened. His smile didn't just fade, it cracked, like glass under pressure. He laughed, but it came out wrong. Too loud. Too fast. The kind of laugh people use when they're panicking. Wait, how do you know him? He asked. Good question. Because the man sitting across from me wasn't a stranger I met to make a point. He wasn't a rebound. He wasn't there for revenge optics. He was someone Ethan knew very well. Someone whose name had come up before in stories Ethan told with half-truths and carefully edited details. I glanced at the man beside me. Calm. Unbothered. He didn't speak yet. He didn't need to. That silence did more damage than words ever could. You could see it on Ethan's face. The mental math. The dots connecting. The realization that whatever narrative he'd been spinning, about me, about his ex, about who was basic and who wasn't, was suddenly under threat. Is this a joke? Ethan asked. I leaned back in my chair. Finally met his eyes. No, I said. This is what happens when you underestimate someone. He swallowed. Hard. Because now he wasn't sure who knew what. Or how long this conversation had been waiting to happen. And when the man across from me finally set his cup down and spoke, Ethan realized this wasn't just awkward anymore. It was dangerous. And what he said next would expose everything Ethan had been lying about. What would you do if the version of yourself you carefully hid suddenly walked into the room? Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes kept darting between me and the man across from me, like he was watching two mirrors reflect a truth he'd been avoiding. The cafe noise faded. Plates clinked somewhere behind us. A barista called out a name. None of it mattered. Explain, Ethan said, finally. Not confident. Not commanding. Small. The man across from me finally spoke. Calm voice. Measured. The kind of tone that doesn't rush because it doesn't have to. I used to work with your ex, he said. A long time ago. Ethan froze. I could see it. That instant recalculation. Because Ethan had told me a version of that story before. A cleaner version. One where timelines were fuzzy and names were conveniently left out. You said you barely knew him, I said softly. He shook his head. Too fast. That's not what I meant. Isn't it always? The man continued. She talked about you a lot. About how you treated people when you thought no one was watching. Ethan's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides. You set me up, he snapped, looking at me now. I didn't flinch. No. I just stopped protecting your lies. Silence hit hard. Heavy. Unforgiving. Ethan looked around the cafe, suddenly aware of how exposed he was. How public this moment had become. How many exits were suddenly too far away. Then he asked the one question that told me everything. How long have you known? And I realized the answer would decide how this ended. How long have I known? That question sat between us like a loaded weapon. Because the truth wasn't clean. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow. Quiet. The kind of knowing that creeps in when small things stop adding up. Long enough, I said. Ethan exhaled sharply, pacing once, then stopping. So, this was revenge. No, I replied. This was clarity. The man across from me leaned back, giving us space. He didn't need to say more. His presence alone had already cracked the story Ethan had been selling for years. You let me believe I was basic, I continued. That I wasn't enough for the life you wanted. But you never told me what that life actually looked like. Ethan laughed, bitter. You wouldn't understand it. I tilted my head. Try me. He hesitated. And that hesitation said more than any confession ever could. I wanted options, he said finally. I didn't want to feel tied down. There it was. Not ambition. Not growth. Just entitlement dressed up as honesty. So you kept her around, I said. And me around. Just in case. He didn't deny it. The cafe door opened. A burst of air rushed in. People walked past us, unaware that something irreversible was happening at a small table near the window. I didn't plan this, Ethan said, quieter now. It just happened. I stood up. You're right, I said. You didn't plan it. I picked up my bag and looked him straight in the eyes. But I did. And as I turned to leave, Ethan said something that made me stop mid-step. Wait, Ethan said. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to carry. I paused, hands still on the strap of my bag. I didn't turn around. What? I asked. You're not seriously walking away like this, he said. After everything? I finally faced him. And for the first time that afternoon, I saw it clearly. Not confidence. Not superiority. Fear. The kind that creeps in when someone realizes the version of themselves they believed in no longer works. Like what? I asked. Like you didn't just tell me you wanted options? Like you didn't disappear all night and expect me to smile and trust you? He rubbed his face, frustrated. You're twisting this. No, I said calmly. I'm untangling it. The man at the table shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't enjoying this anymore. He had served his purpose. The truth had landed. You think you won, Ethan said. Showing up here. Making a scene. I almost laughed. Almost. This isn't a scene, I replied. This is closure. I took a step back, creating space. The kind of space he never gave me. You wanted a life where no one questioned you, I continued. Where accountability was optional. Congratulations. You're free now. His jaw tightened. And what about you? I met his eyes. Steady. Certain. I stopped being basic the moment I stopped accepting less. I turned again, ready to leave for real this time. That's when Ethan said the one sentence that changed the direction of everything and made me realize this wasn't over yet. Ethan's voice dropped. Wait, he said. She's not my ex. That was the sentence. I turned slowly, my stomach tightening in a way that surprised me. What? She's complicated, he added quickly. We never really ended things. And suddenly, everything made sense. The disappearing acts. The defensiveness. The way he spoke about me like I was temporary. I wasn't a partner to him. I was a placeholder. I felt something unexpected then. Not anger. Relief. Thank you, I said. He blinked. For what? For finally telling the truth, I replied. Even if you waited until it didn't matter anymore. I looked at the man who'd been sitting across from me, the one Ethan hadn't recognized at first. He nodded, quietly respectful. There was nothing romantic there. That wasn't the point. The point was that I had options too. I just never needed to hide them. Ethan stood up, panic edging his voice. So this is it? Yes, I said. This is it. I walked out of the cafe into the afternoon light, phone buzzing with messages I didn't bother to read. Because being called too basic only hurts when you still want approval from someone who never deserved you. And the moment I stopped wanting it, that's when I won.